Maryland basketball pulls off a huge win against Wisconsin.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for making us part of your day. And I'm also here with Ahmed Gafir, head of Inside Black and Gold. So make sure you guys head over to insideblackandgold.net for all your latest Terps news. And today's episode is brought to you by the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Maryland basketball is on an absolute roll and gets another huge win at home this time against number 17th Wisconsin in a really cool atmosphere. Ahmed, let me know kind of your thoughts overall in the game.
Yeah, obviously back and forth contest. Maryland was really able to kind of take control, obviously, in the second half with that three-point shooting. At one point, they were shooting 70% from three, 33% from inside the arc. So between Selton Miguel, obviously Jacoby Gillespie, and Rodney Rice being able to provide that spark, Julian Reese kind of able to pick up some of that front court scoring as well. So obviously another balanced effort from that starting group. Derek Queen, a little bit of a struggle from a scoring perspective, but I believe he was the first one in double figures in terms of rebounds. Ended up finishing with this sixth double of the season. So all around, definitely an encouraging performance. First game with students back. He expected an improved atmosphere inside College Park, and it definitely did not disappoint. And like we said, Maryland gets that much needed win and gets back to 500 quad one games this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Maryland, to me, has hit their stride over the last really 4, 5, 6 games. We've gotten a lot of wins, and I think, to me, the biggest thing is we figured out how to win games late. I think in other games, and whether it be on the road or at home, we couldn't win games late, whether it was Washington losing by 6 points late in the game, Oregon came down to the wire, even Northwestern was a loss that just we couldn't figure out how to win late. And I saw a Terps team that was back and forth for most of the game against Wisconsin, the 17th ranked Badgers. And I think that was one of my biggest takeaways is watching the Terps being able to win late. I thought that was one of the biggest storylines to me, to be able to really separate and really not make it too much of a sweat at the end of the game. I mean, Wisconsin hit a couple of shots, but it wasn't too big of a deal. Maryland was able to really separate themselves towards the end of the games, and I've seen that on this win streak. Maryland be able to do that is just win games at the end, figure it out.
Yeah, and I actually, I agree with that. I think, the last couple minutes of that first half, I think it was 5-6 minutes left. Wisconsin was holding on to a 3-5 point lead. 6:52 left. Wisconsin was up 23-16, and Maryland was able to get hot a little bit, take advantage from the free throw line. But Derek Queen, Tafara Kapari was able to add in 3 as well. So I thought Maryland being able to kind of close that gap a little bit, and obviously going into halftime with that 1 point advantage, I thought was a huge swing. And potentially shaping up for the second half. Obviously, Wisconsin came out firing, but like we said, that 3-point shooting was kind of able to weather the storm and eventually really bring the crowd back into it.
Yeah, the atmosphere is definitely something that I want to touch on because I think by far this game was the best atmosphere that we've seen so far for Maryland basketball, and that stuff matters. College basketball is a sport a lot of students like to go to, a lot of people watch, and the atmosphere and the home court advantage is really a thing. I really noticed that when we would play Illinois, when we played Indiana, our last 2 games before this Wisconsin game, they had a really live atmosphere, and it was cool to see Maryland having a really awesome atmosphere for this game. I thought that was one of the biggest storylines of this game is just the atmosphere that Maryland played with in this game. It was, I guess they call it like a gold out, or I don't know the exact description. Yeah, the gold rush. So I thought that was a big storyline, seeing Maryland fans really come out and get excited about a good basketball team this year.
Yeah, and I think Maryland's. I think they I don't think they introduced it, but I think it was there when I was in college, back when we were still playing Duke. So I guess I'm showing my age a little bit, but obviously, I think Maryland, you always kind of get that kind of that weird period with Maryland because winter break kind of goes so long and goes so late into January where you kind of miss, maybe 2-3 conference games at home. Obviously, you had the Ohio State game in College Park where fans were able to, or students were able to come for that. But like you said, being able to kind of really get the crowd into it and kind of going into the game, was listening to the BTN crew kind of talk about this game, talk about how Wisconsin would have to battle the front court. Derek Queen would, have to have to make some adjustments on the defensive end as well. But Andy Katz kind of pointed to what the X factor would be in this game, and he pointed to that crowd, that atmosphere inside Xfinity Center, and it really felt like in that second half that Maryland kind of needed that point to kind of really get that crowd into it. When I think it was Salt Miguel was the one that hit that 3-pointer to go up 450, and kind of felt like that was starting to be the turning point. And really since then, it felt like the crowd, not that they weren't before, but they really, really got loud and kind of continued to will Maryland to a victory down the stretch. And I will say, Scott Van Pelt, I think, he talked about in his podcast, I think Maryland basketball, they posted on their Twitter account. This is kind of one of those games where the fans kind of will you to a win. And, the fans really did not disappoint tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that of the fans. Not disappointing and really showing out. And I think something else that I want to hit on is the foul trouble was actually really interesting in this game. Wisconsin, two of their best guys got in foul trouble a little bit late in games of their point or late in the first half, which I thought you touched on earlier, how Maryland was able to end the half well and cut the lead. But Maryland guys really were in foul trouble for different parts of the game. What really stood out to me was Rodney Rice getting his fourth foul. I don't think I really processed how many fouls he had when I was watching the game, and you could tell how frustrated he was when he picked up his fourth. And I was like, he seemed a little bit more mad than I thought he would be, just because I didn't realize he had his fourth foul. So I thought that was something that I was really happy about, was Maryland fighting through some of the foul troubles that they had. And then Miguel picked up a late fourth foul as well. I thought Maryland did a really good job of figuring it out. Wow, there was some foul trouble going on. And Rodney Rice has been one of our best players, one of our most consistent guys. And that was, I thought, a big part of this game, was figuring out how to win while kind of balancing the foul trouble.
Yeah, and Jacoby Gillespie at one point, he was on the bench with ice on his knee. I think it was that offensive foul call at the under 16 timeout, which was, I could believe it was a little bit of a questionable of a call, if you ask me, honestly. But Maryland kind of being able to will through it. And again, Derek Queen, we've kind of seen it through conference play, and it's kind of expected. It's understandable at times. I shouldn't say expected, but understandable for a freshman to kind of go through his lulls, especially first round in conference play. And again, Maryland's kind of had to figure out how to win without them. And again, this is a Wisconsin team that again, they especially in that first half, they were able to really, do well from three, and that would kind of put a thorn in Maryland's side. So, this Wisconsin team also plays Maryland well historically inside Xfinity. So, again, I think Rodney Rice, like you mentioned, picking up a couple of those fouls. I think it was 3 fouls in the first 8 minutes of the second half. South Miguel picked up 2 coming out of that under 8 timeout. So, again, Maryland kind of being able to mitigate some of that down the stretch. You saw a lot of Jay Young. You saw a lot more Deshaun Harris-Smith, especially after not seeing the bench really these last couple of games. In Illinois, against Indiana. Just seeing Jay Young, Deshaun Harris-Smith, who hit that big 3 to kind of jumpstart that run. I think it was Deshaun Harris-Smith, Miguel, then Bryce, to kind of put Maryland ahead and really, like we said, get the crowd into it. But to get some of those contributions from the bench, I thought was a lift for Maryland.
Yeah, before we move on, I thought the bench was big, because you saw, like you talked about, Deshaun Harris-Smith hitting a huge 3, Gapari hitting a huge 3, and that's something that hasn't really been there a ton this year, and I'd probably argue is probably the weakness of this Maryland team is probably the bench. I think the starting five, like the Big Ten cast was talking about, really good starting five, amongst the best in the Big Ten. Maybe you could argue the best in the Big Ten, but the bench is definitely something that is definitely a question mark. So seeing Deshaun Harris-Smith, we know struggles with confidence sometimes with the shot, hit a huge shot. Credit to those guys off the bench, and credit to Kevin Willard for being able to get those guys going a little bit off the bench.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, the bench, in terms of bench production, I do think that is kind of a glaring, weakness, kind of a concern for Maryland right now. Something that you can definitely point to. But I'll make the argument that, a Jay Young, when he's coming into the game, you're not asking a Jay Young type to, really be a score first point guard. You're kind of looking at him to be a facilitator. And again, Willard talked about in preseason, that's kind of lived up into the season, into conference play. He's definitely an asset on the defensive end. And, Deshaun Harris-Smith, obviously, his struggles. But again, hit a timely three like we talked about. He's able to kind of provide that strength on defense as well. And then Tafari Kapari, him and Jordan Geronimo, he talked about, he was asked about substitution methods and, what kind of goes into it, what's his thought process. And he says, that's a lot more of, matchup based, when you look at an Illinois type where it's, a lot more, just fast tempo, especially with the Illini big man out. You kind of need your guards and, Tafari Kapari, that's kind of a better fit. And then Indiana, where it's a lot more bruiser, you have the big men from Indiana, where it's just, you got to win the boards, got to win the paint. It's just a more of a Geronimo type fit. So I do think that Maryland kind of has some complementary pieces that kind of come off the bench. But again, I think that the little concern, I guess, why I don't view that as much of a concern for me is kind of what we talked about tonight. All 5 starters finishing in double figures. So they re-emphasizing what you said. Great win tonight.
Yeah. We'll dive a little bit more into the stats and specific player performance after this quick ad from the Gametime app. Attending the NFL playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, and the connection with the other fans are unmatched. I remember the thrill of seeing my favorite team clinch a playoff win live. It's a memory I'll never forget. This year, Gametime makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Gametime Picks. It filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters, being there. I use Gametime Picks to grab tickets for upcoming playoff games, and it couldn't have been easier. I found a super deal that gave me incredible value for amazing seats, and I could even preview the view from my spot before buying. The all-in pricing is a game changer. No surprise fees at checkout. Plus, knowing my tickets are backed by the Gametime guarantee gave me a complete peace of mind. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So I'm going to dive a little bit more into some of the player stats and some of the performances from specific players. I want to start, we touched on it a little bit, but I thought the Derek Queen struggles, I think that they're going to happen, like you said, but the fact that we were able to overcome and still win basketball games really shows me how good this team is and how much of a better team that it is than last year's team. Obviously, when Jameer Young didn't perform last year, we wouldn't win games. And Maryland's much more balanced this year. And Derek Queen can shoot 3 of 14 from the field, and we can still beat a team like Wisconsin.
Yeah, like you said, I thought Maryland, thought there were definitely some plays early on, some shot attempts early on in the game from Queen and from Julian Reese. I thought, there was just both teams are kind of fighting through a lot of contact in the paint. I thought they were kind of letting them through it a little bit. Julian Reese, I think it was Robbie Hummel talked about, he's missing some bunnies, some easy ones around the rim. And, Sure, that they were point blank range and kind of uncharacteristic from both those guys, but definitely thought it was kind of a physical game. But like you talked about, like we've said, kind of through Big Ten play, really post the first two games, Ohio State, Purdue at Purdue. Derek Queen has kind of had these struggles. Nebraska, he was able to kind of break out. I think it was 27 points, 20 plus 20 points. But again, the Derek Queen, what he was kind of able to make up for was cleaning up on the glass, coming down with a game high 10 rebounds there.
Yeah. Him having another double with only shooting 3 of 14 from the field, I thought was something that was really good for him to be able to get other parts of his game going. Also had 2 blocks as well, had 2 assists and a steal. So he's able to impact the game in other ways besides scoring. And then as well as Gillespie, he had an interesting type of game. I kind of want to talk about him. He's been really good this year for Maryland. He succeeded kind of what I thought he was going to be coming in. I thought he was going to be good, but I didn't think he was going to be this good. But similar to Queen, he kind of had an interesting shooting day. 4 of 13 from the field, ended up turning it up from the 3-point range later on in the game, and it ended up being 3 for 9, which isn't horrible at all. But I thought he's been a real guy to keep the offense together. It seems like every game I look, he has over 5, 6, 7 assists. So I think he's a guy that's been really big for the Terps and had another a game where it wasn't perfect for him, but he was able to get it done when we needed him to.
Yeah, I was actually just looking. I noticed he finished with 4 turnovers. That's the most turnovers he's had since the UCLA game. So I thought he had his moments, but like you said, he hit some timely threes, especially in that second half. I don't know if he called bank on that 1 3, but we'll take it from him. But I thought obviously he was kind of able to do a good job kind of facilitating, and kind of felt like the pick and roll Wisconsin was doing a good job kind of defending on that. And Gillespie was doing a good job of kind of at times kind of not forcing it, but again, with 4 turnovers, not all terrible turnovers, but kind of getting there. But again, the 3-point shooting is kind of really what he, from time and time again, proves himself to be a clutch player.
Yeah, for sure. And Maryland was able to get to 50% from the 3-point arc, which I thought was really impressive, which was really the biggest difference in the game. I thought Wisconsin didn't shoot the ball particularly well from the free throw line, and the Big Ten cast kept talking about it because they're like, all 5 starters for Wisconsin shoot the free throw line really well, but they ended up only shooting 71% from the free throw line and 33% from the 3-point line compared to 50% from Maryland. And I thought that was probably the biggest difference, in my opinion, in the game. And thanks to Selton Miguel and Rodney Rice for making 7 combined threes between those 2 guys.
Yeah, I mean, Selton Miguel, Rice, and Gillespie, all those guys, combined for 10 threes. So, again, really this backcourt. I will say there was at one point in the second half when one of them hit a 3, and I thought to myself, how the hell did we get through last year? So, I mean, it's been refreshing to kind of have these portal guys. Willard's talked about it every single time these guys come up, that they all, that what they looked for in the portal was guys who can shoot, whether it was pure shooting, whether it was the off the catch and shoot, pick and roll, kind of facilitate, and these guys, Selton Miguel's kind of had his moments. Rodney Rice had his, cold streak a little bit early, non-conference play, but for the most part, these guys have been able to lift to the billing. And again, it's why Willard targeted these shooters to pair along with Julian Reese and Derek Queen, who kind of are able to kind of control the paint there. So again, I think the backcourt really was able to kind of give Maryland that needed separation there in the second half.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think for me, the main takeaway, which we touched on a little bit, is the balance of this lineup. It's a balanced Terps team. And to me, in my opinion, I'm curious what you think, but that's what wins to me in March. Later on in the season, Maryland is a team where you don't know necessarily who's going to go off. It can be so many different guys, but to me, that's a real great thing. It's kind of a beautiful thing, and I think that wins in March. I'm curious what you think, but I think the balance is something that has been a main takeaway this year. When you just look at the stat sheet, very balanced in terms of scoring.
And it's really been like that, even when,
Mm-hmm.
you'll have one player that's kind of leading with 20, 25 points, you'll have another that's right behind him. So I agree, and I think sometimes when you kind of look at, you have to say, hey, who is Maryland's go-to guy? Well, you can kind of look at all starting five and say, hey, they sure, they could all have their games. They could all have their moments where we saw Rodney Rice, Selton Miguel,
Yeah.
the stretch when he was Syracuse. I can't remember the St. Francis, I think. He was just kind of unconscious that week.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
again, you kind of really do look, and I could kind of extend it to the bench a little bit, but again, I really feel like with any of those guys in the starting five, you can kind of draw up plays, and I think that's kind of part of that ingredient, that recipe, I guess, for Maryland that does make them a little bit dangerous. Where you go into March, there you do have multiple heads that you kind of have to stop. Sure, you slow down Gillespie as that point guard, a ball handler, that kind of cuts off a lot of the options there. But again, I think Selton Miguel has kind of proven to be the alpha dog. Obviously, Rodney Rice is now 2 games removed from the buzzer beater against Indiana. So again, all these guys have proven that they can hit the shots. Gillespie, we saw it. I think it was both road games or earlier this month, consecutive games where he hit jumpers or layups as time expired. So obviously Willard trusts him to go to him in late game situations. We've seen it with Julian Reese. We've seen the Derek Queen phenom. So again, I completely agree with you. I think the starting five is probably the most balanced, and you can really tell the on-court chemistry. I think that's the other ingredient. They really can kind of they're clicking, and especially when Selton Miguel, when those shots are dropping. Four 3-pointers tonight. That's his 4th game this season with 4 more threes in a game. They're hard to stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. Totally. I really like the balance so far this year. It's refreshing from last year. Last, we're going to talk about a little bit of the grander scheme of things, looking at where Maryland is ranked and everything in terms of the Big Ten ranking. Should Maryland be ranked after this week? We'll talk about that next. So I don't know if it was a surprise completely, but I think a lot of Maryland fans, including me, were surprised that Maryland wasn't ranked after the 2 wins, the Big Ten wins against Indiana and Illinois. I'm curious, Ahmed, kind of what did you think?
Did you think, completely valid, kind of going into this week? I thought, did they definitely had a chance? I posted a poll on the board and was kind of surprised that more people thought that they wouldn't end up being ranked. But I think, obviously, with this one game this week, obviously with Maryland being able to, I wouldn't say comfortably, but, being able to kind of take care of business at home, obviously pick up the W. And the only game this week, I think, obviously, after unofficially checking in at 27, feels pretty obvious that Maryland will get ranked. I would be absolutely floored if they're not. It would be their first AP ranking since February 27th, 2023. And I kind of feel like that maybe that 21 to 23 range, maybe 20. I could see that, but I kind of feel like that's probably that sweet spot for Maryland to jump into.
Yeah, me too. I agree with that. That 20-ish range to me seems about right. And then of course the ranking matters, but I think when we talk about the Big Ten standings, I think that's something that's really important. And when you look at Maryland and where they lie, I think they're in a really good spot right now. That Wisconsin game was huge because we were right next to each other on the standings, and now Maryland leaps ahead of Wisconsin. When you look at things, the only 3 teams above Maryland, Michigan State, Purdue, and Michigan. Maryland gets to play Michigan State, still gets to play Michigan as well. But I think being 7-4 in conference is honestly a really good spot. Michigan State's kind of killing it, or is killing it this year, not kind of being 9-0 in conference. So it's going to be tough to kind of actually be able to win the regular season title. But you don't have to do that. You just want to put yourself in, obviously you want to do that, and that's a goal of theirs. But you want to put yourself in position when the Big Ten tournament comes around and for March.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of was looking ahead at the schedule after the Wisconsin game. I think Maryland, there's a possibility where you're really able to really build momentum in February. And I think kind of like you talked about, obviously, being able to, position themselves well in the Big Ten standings, climbing into the top four. Historically, Maryland has been able to finish routinely in that top four, top five in conference play. But I think, obviously, that next game at Ohio State coming off, I believe, is a 24-point win at home, December 4th. It will be interesting to see, Ohio State will be at full strength. I think that's kind of a toss-up. But then again, you got Rutgers, you got Nebraska, you got Iowa, you got USC. And after Ohio State, I mean, even including Ohio State, 3 out of the next 5 are at home for Maryland. And then you welcome Michigan State back to Xfinity Center which will be probably that just as big of a game as it is tonight. Michigan State, February 26th, 2 days before March kicks off. I don't know that I love seeing Sparty on the calendar that late, or that close to March. But again, Maryland really, like we talked about, winning, being able to generate this momentum and pick up that third-ranked win tonight. Really staying on the right side of the bubble and kind of continuing to build. So I agree. I think Maryland's in a really good spot. And I really could see Maryland starting to get more national buzz over these next 2 weeks.
Yeah. And I think the interesting part about it, you talked about the Ohio State game next, but Maryland's schedule really gets easier, to be honest. You hit kind of an easy stride of things. With Ohio State being pretty good this year, but Rutgers, they're kind of feel like they're falling apart. Nebraska's not great. Iowa's not great. USC is interesting. Like you get a really good streak before Michigan State where Maryland can really separate themselves.
Yeah, again, even if Maryland does end up dropping one of the next 5 between Ohio State, Rutgers, at Nebraska, Iowa, USC, that's a heck of a way. So I mean, we're talking about Maryland likely being in the AP top 25 next week. I mean, if you're looking at at a minimum winning 4 out of the next 5, it could Maryland be eventually staring at a top 15, maybe outside of the top 10. You never know. And again, I think that's kind of assuming that every Big Ten game is easy. We're also assuming obviously coming off the Illinois Indiana wins on the road, that takes the monkey off their back a little bit. The pressure from winning away from College Park. So, Maryland's shown that they can do that. Can they consistently do that? We'll see. Nebraska and Ohio State, those aren't pushover places either. But again, like we said, I think this slate getting through January the way they did, I think Maryland really has a chance to generate some momentum. And like we said, Andy Katz kind of talking up the Maryland-Wisconsin game ahead of tip-off. He also pointed to Maryland and looked at the schedule and said, what, when you look at, Purdue, Illinois, Michigan State kind of being the top 3, who's going to be that number 4 in the Big Ten? And he pointed to Maryland, and with that schedule being a point in Maryland's favor. So we'll see. Again, Maryland has a chance to continue taking care of business, and heck of a bounce back year 3 so far, but nonetheless, day by day, and a big win tonight.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, great having you on, Ahmed.
It's great being on tonight, man.
Make sure you guys head over to InsideBlackandGold.net. There's a ton of good stuff going on the website for all your latest Terps news, basketball, football, recruiting, all those different things that you want. Make sure you guys head over there. And then thank you for listening to Locked On Terps. So make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you for listening to Locked On Terps.